Back out by Jamie Baker. Yushkevich wheels it back in. Lindros lost. Archibald takes him out of the play. Up with it is Recchi. Walks in front. Shot one, knocked down. Rebound, score! Lindros!
The Fourth Period presents the O&B Puckcast, episode number 88. As we are now in the Flyers off-season, and the question remains, how much of a change do the Flyers need? And we're going to be tackling that and a lot more. I'm your host, Isaiah, and I'm here with my partners, Chef B.
How you doing?
And, of course, the great Dan Silver.
Going on. The off season of craziness hopefully will start soon.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to have Russ Cohen on from Sportsology.com and Off the Post Radio coming up pretty shortly. But gents, before he comes on, let's clean up some business here with the team. You know, we've had a lot of discussion points that we could concentrate on with the press conferences of Chuck Fletcher, Alain Vigneault. Alain Vigneault had a very interesting interview with Steve Koulias on SiriusXM. And Dan, I just want to get your handle on, between the two of them, some of the bullet points, if you will, that stuck out to you.
So, I mean, you know, everyone always wants to kind of talk about Nolan Patrick, and that was something where there was an interesting tidbit from Chuck Fletcher just mentioning, you know, that he's sort of close to resuming a normal lifestyle and that he's been playing some golf, which was kind of interesting. I mean, because we just can't seem to get any kind of clean information on that one. So I thought that the fact that he didn't really, it didn't, again, there's just no kind of like promising updates on that, which is not surprising. One of the things that it seemed to me that, got some Flyers fans riled up was that Chuck Fletcher was talking about needing to make changes to, the bottom nine and needing some more scoring from there. And I think some people were expecting him to maybe hold some of the higher profile star players to the fire a little bit based on the lack of performance in the playoffs, and he sort of stopped short of doing that. So I think I did see a bunch of the Twitter folks kind of lamenting that. I had no issues with it because I think that ultimately the bottom six is a little bit of a bigger concern than the top six at this point. So that was kind of interesting. And then of course with Vigneault, you get a little bit more of the frank answers, and he's willing to, talk about how I think it was Vigneault that said that Claude Giroux, he thought maybe, not that he didn't get to the bubble in his good shape, that he wasn't there and that he wasn't in bad shape, but just that he could have had a little bit better conditioning for the beginning of it, and it took him a little while to get going. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But I didn't see anything too crazy or unexpected from either guy.
Well, yeah, there were a couple different series of interviews with both. And we were talking beforehand, Chef, about some of the interviews that Jason Martinez has conducted that were apart from the ones where the whole press corps and beat writers were available. One thing that struck me was the Sirius interview that Alain Vigneault did where he talked about Claude Giroux and how he had to make some serious adjustments, not only to his conditioning and how he wasn't getting any younger, but he had to make adjustments to his game to address the fact that him and Voracek and JVR are getting older. And it seemed to come across in that interview that AV was almost like, and again, this is my inference, it's not necessarily exactly what AV wanted to put across. It's almost like he was saying he wants this to be Sean Couturier's team. Now, we're not talking about a captain thing so much as he likes the way Coots approaches his business, and that G really needs to make an adjustment to get back to some semblance of the player that he was at the age of 32.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Some of the players around the league, you see they, as they got older, it's inevitable. You get a little slower, you miss a little something. But what can help you out, I guess, is your conditioning during the course of a season. I understand this was all interrupted, and AV alluded to that a little bit, but your sports IQ is what can bail you out, where you should be on the ice, when you should be on the ice, what in what areas, what you should be doing. And I was thinking, to me, I get what you're saying, but I was feeling more along the lines it was, hey, you're going to have to adopt the same old things that you were doing before are not going to work anymore. I mean, it was probably said for all three of them. I mean, a little bit for JVR. I saw a little different from JVR later in that, in the second series. But, I think it was a little bit too late. I think he started to adapt. But from Giroux and Voracek, they were pretty much going to the same areas on the power play, doing the same passing with the power play. And I think that's what more he was alluding to. Like, hey, look, if you keep doing the same old things, you're going to get the same old results. So now you need to start changing. You need to evolve. If you know that they're going to go for that, you do something else. You got to be unpredictable. You got to evolve. And I think that's what he was talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that really quickly, as Chef was talking, I kind of started thinking about some of the older pitchers in baseball who, when they lose, a couple miles per hour, 5 miles per hour off their fastball, they sort of have to reinvent themselves because the way that they were able to succeed wasn't an option for them anymore. And with Claude Giroux, you could kind of, make the same kind of argument that as you get older, some of those skills start going away a little bit. Maybe his one-timer's not as good a weapon as it previously was. And, his skating, which has never been great, you'll start losing some steps when you get a little bit older. So it's almost like maybe he's got to figure out a way to reinvent himself and his game so that he can, adapt his skill set and his declining skill set and physical attributes to a style that will work more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good analogy. Is the core here those top three older players that are signed to big contracts, Dan? Is there too much of a gap between what the Flyers are expecting from them, what they're able to deliver, and what the Flyers are expecting to do over the next year or two? Does there need to be a fundamental change in that regard, or even because of the reality of the flat cap, will that necessitate that even to a greater extent?
I mean, I think that most of the teams around the league, it's just the price of doing business. You're going to have some veterans that are, overpaid in relation to how they perform, but you have to just even it out with the young kids who are on entry-level contracts. More and more these days, kids are really performing on their entry-level contracts. And so, right now the Flyers have one more year of Carter Hart on the entry-level contract and Joel Farabee on the entry-level contract, Morgan Frost on an entry-level contract. So I think it's going to be about, for them, I think every team's got these older players who overpaid. It's going to be more about, okay, how close to stardom can we get these kids who are on the ELCs to really start improving? And that's when you start getting into the type of thing where, hey, we can win a Stanley Cup because we have that combination of players. Look, they weren't that far off this year. I mean, they made it to the final 8, they were one of the final 5 teams playing, and that was pretty cool. And there's things they need to improve upon, but I think that just the improvement that you're going to see from the young kids, may be able to be enough to put this team into the realm of legitimate Stanley Cup contender for next season.
Also, I want to piggyback that too. You were talking about the younger players. You're going to need them more so because the season is going to be condensed. Remember, they had originally talked about November. They pushed it to December, possibly even January. But they are fully intent on playing 82 games. So when you think about that now, that's going to be like a lot of back-to-backs, a lot of 4 games a week, 4 and 6 or whatever, and it's going to be a tough schedule. You're going to need these younger kids with their ability to bounce back a lot faster to deal with some of this stuff too.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the NHL came out this weekend. Gary Bettman was talking about maybe backing off that December 1st date, and I think the range of a restart would be anywhere from mid-December to mid-January. So they're going to watch that. They're going to watch the science, and who knows what happens. They did an excellent job with the return to play and the execution of this whole thing. And, so right now we have Dallas and Tampa Bay in the Stanley Cup Finals, and we're not going to get into that too much tonight, but they've done a great job. And they deserve a lot of credit, so I'm going to trust them on that. But we talked earlier about adjusting or adapting their games. Now, Bobby Clarke adapted his game and was good enough to get a Selke trophy, and I think it was 1982. And he wasn't the same Bobby Clarke that he was in 1976 or 1973 when I think he won the MVP. And the Flyers, Dan, got their own Selke Trophy winner, their first one since 1987, I believe, when Dave Poulin won it. Sean Couturier finally breaks through and wins that trophy, and I think it's well-deserved.
Yeah, I mean, you always love to see a player like Sean Couturier, who we've known how good he is as a two-way player for a number of years, finally get to do with that Selke Trophy. I mean, it's very... those individual accolades are very cool. And, but I don't know. I mean, I'm almost more concerned about the, knee injuries he keeps having, assuming the injury in this year's playoffs was kind of like the same thing he's had before, the MCL sprain. Yeah. You kind of worry more about him slowing down. Like, okay, he's got the Selke now, but hey, I'm sure he would tell you that a Stanley Cup's more important to him. And hopefully that he doesn't keep having issues with that knee. His game obviously is not really built around speed, so it might not be that big of a deal. But yeah, look, it's fun and exciting for him to get the Selke. But I'm just hoping that age doesn't slow him down too much with that knee injury.
That's definitely a concern. He's had about at least 3 of those, maybe even 4, in his Flyers tenure, and it's something to watch out for. But what's interesting, Chef, is our buddy from brotherlypuck.com, Manny Benavides, wrote a really good article about the correlation between the Stanley Cup and winning the Selke Trophy, and how many Selke Trophy winners are associated with winning that trophy. And it was very interesting and a good job by Manny. You want to check that out at brotherlypuck.com. And it makes you think about, what are the ingredients for a winning team? And it's something that came up on Twitter when Bill Meltzer was talking about how Stanley Cups are won in 2020. And you look at maybe even just since the lockout, goaltending and defense and being able to lock teams down. As long as you have a requisite level of offensive talent, you would rather lean in that direction than being the team that has not quite enough defense.
Oh, definitely. And I think we talked to it. I do believe it's you. It said the best thing that AV could do for this team when he comes in is he cut down the amount of percentage shots going towards, the goalie, which was good. He put in a couple of we put in a couple of veteran guys that helped too, stabilize what you had. I think that's great. I think Carter Hart coming and emerging as a number one goalie, maybe even top 3 in the league goalie, to some of the saves he made and some of the situations he was in this year for such a young age. I thought he did great. But but obviously, when it came down to it, the Flyers' problem, I thought, was their ability just to keep their own momentum going anymore. To get that necessary goal, especially in the playoffs, it seems like when they were down, almost they were out. And I've seen that before. I shouldn't say we. I said I've seen it before, in the teams of the past, and that's what worried me. I want that support from up high from the guys on the team, the top 6. I want them to be. They don't have to be Wayne Gretzky, but they have to at least contribute to scoring and be the leaders for these young guys and have that the confidence rubs off, and scoring rubs off too. So if you have that confidence in scoring, they had the other things. In my opinion, they just couldn't score when they needed to.
Yeah, well, that brings me to the other discussion point with regard to last show, when we seemed to indicate that some unanimity with whether the Flyers really had a successful season. And I don't want to take 13 games and make them the be-all, end-all. And I'm certainly not counting the round-robin games, and neither did Chuck Fletcher. But, I can't help but think that maybe the Flyers, and maybe it's semantics, but to me they took a step in the right direction. I don't know if I call it a success per se. They certainly had a lot of really good stuff going on. The defenseman improved. Carter Hart seemed to establish himself as a guy who's going to solve the riddle that the Flyers have had in goal since 1989, and Ron Hextall's last, pretty good year before things change, and that's terrific. But they played really not so well, and we've seen a lot of that from some of these top guys before, and I'm wondering if there's a new element that needs to be added. And I think that's kind of a little bit of a tug of war between what the vibe was listening to AV and Chuck Fletcher. Of course, Chuck Fletcher strikes me as more of a poker player than AV, that's for sure. But it's an interesting question. And Dan, I wanted to get back to you a little bit about Nolan Patrick. And with the folks over at crossingbroad.com, Anthony Sanfilippo was talking a little bit about how there seems to be between the lines, and Ant used to work for the team, so he still has some contacts there. There seems to be a vibe he's getting that if no one doesn't come back real soon this year, it might be an indication that he may not want to be here. And is this just like a soap opera while we're waiting for things to play out?
With Nolan Patrick, I wrote an article before the Flyers even drafted him, basically detailing how big of a risk I thought it would be taking him, because when you look at guys who were taken first or second overall, there's only a few comparables that had an injury history like he did. Nolan Patrick had a voluminous injury history even before he was drafted in the NHL. And the closest comparable I could find was Patrick Stefan, who was taken first or second overall by the Atlanta Thrashers and ended up having a bunch of concussion issues and retiring early, and I had hesitations right from the start. It's funny. One of the thoughts this is going to sound a little crazy, but when the Flyers won the lottery, I was so excited. And then I started thinking about it because I was pretty sure that Hischier was going to go first and they were going to get Nolan Patrick. And I said to myself, I really hope that we don't look at this 5 to 10 years down the road and say, man, I wish we hadn't won the lottery because we had to take Nolan Patrick in that spot. Instead, if we would have just stayed at number 10, who knows who we would have gotten. And again, that may sound a little nuts, but that was a thought that was going through my head. And so I'm not surprised by any of what's going on because, look, injury-prone guys are injury-prone. I understand that people want to say, oh, it's, migraines, not necessarily associated with the concussions he's had. I don't know if I buy that or not, but he's an injury-prone player. And not only that, but some of the things I've heard from reporters who deal with the Flyers a lot are that they think that he maybe, I don't know, that he's a little bit arrogant. I've heard this, and are not sure of his fit in the locker room. Now,
He's a bit of a prima donna.
Yeah, you don't like to conjecture that, but I have heard that from some of the reporters that cover them, and it's the complete opposite when you look at how excited everyone was for the return of Oskar Lindblom, right? Like, they brought Lindblom to the bubble. Even though the guy's recovering from cancer, he has a chance to play. And you just don't get that vibe when they're talking about Nolan Patrick. So I don't get good vibes around him. I never have gotten good vibes from him. And it's a shame. And look, maybe he's going to come back full strength next year and be the third line center that this team needs. But I certainly wouldn't bet on it. And I'm a betting man. So, I guess we'll see what happens, but I am not optimistic whatsoever about him.
And you know what? Can I add something too?
Yeah.
Because I was sitting here thinking, like, if you said that it was a bad deal, I mean, he's up. He's an RFA, right?
Yeah.
So basically, do you offer him something or do you just let it slide? And I was talking about it with a couple of people in person, and I thought, thank God I didn't do this online. I'd be berated. I'm like, no. I said, I think you should let him walk. At the best, he should get his whatever he got in his ELC as a trade, and he's got to show me he can play again. I'm not going to give him a 3-year deal like I did Lindblom. Lindblom showed me he could play still, and so I'm at the camp where if he gets on the ice, he can do stuff before all this happens. Okay, then fine, give him a 1-year deal. Let him show. I'll give him $1 million to prove me wrong. And then after he proves me wrong, then we'll talk about a contract. But until that point, I like Dan said, I get the feeling he doesn't even want to be here. I think he thinks his window of opportunity is closed. This is not going to be his team anymore. I don't know what it is, but that's just how I feel about it.
Yeah, and it's not like he doesn't have a spot. That third line center spot is waiting for him. But I don't know. I don't want to put too much on him with the bubble. When you have headaches like migraines, which I happen to have now for 20 years, you never know what someone's triggers are. And if he's getting headaches on and off, do they really want to yo-yo him in and out of the bubble? So even though Oskar had something that's much more serious, the symptomatology that Nolan had is more unpredictable. So if that makes any sense. But yeah, but it is tough. I get the vibe too, right? He's a very closely guarded kind of individual. He's a young man still, of course, and he may need to have a change of scenery. With regard to contract, yeah, probably one year, 1 million, 1.5 or something like that, and see where that takes you, depending on the feedback. I think that's kind of where the Flyers might go with this. It's a very unique situation. Just catching up on some housekeeping here as we were real close to getting Russ Cohen on. Bobby Ryan edged out Oskar Lindblom for the Masterton. I think he definitely could be nominated next year as well with the way things worked out. AV finished second to Bruce Cassidy in the Jack Adams for the award. Nick Obey-Kubel signs for 2 years at $1.075 million per. Any comments on that, Dan, with regards to any of that business right there?
So I don't think any of us were surprised about the voting. I think Oskar Lindblom, we all kind of agreed that next year would be his year to win the Masterton because the voting happened before he came back to play. So I have to think that if he comes back and he plays a full year next year, which he should, that he will probably win that award. And Alain Vigneault, I was not surprised he didn't win. I was surprised that Bruce Cassidy won. I thought,
yes.
I thought it was going to be Torts down in Columbus.
Yep.
So I was a little bit surprised at that, but I wasn't surprised AV didn't win that one. I love the Nicolas Aube-Kubel deal. I think he is the perfect fourth line winger for this team. I love the grit that he brings. I love the scoring punch he can have. He had that big game in the round robin round where he put in 2 goals. So, I'm a big fan of Aube-Kubel, and I love that deal with him.
Yeah, I think that he just kind of worked things out. Got a little sloppy in the playoffs, but the whole team did, so I'm not going to kill him on that. And, it's good. That's good money. It might push Tyler Pitlick out the door, but we kind of knew that too, and I still think that he's got a possibility to be re-signed. Mm-hmm. We'll take a closer look at that kind of stuff when Russ comes on. Yeah.
I just wanted to say something because I saw this on Twitter and I wasn't sure what it meant because I saw someone else saying that they thought that Aube-Kubel signing might push Pitlick out the door. Here's my question though. Aube-Kubel is a restricted free agent. Did anybody think that he wasn't going to re-sign? So, if I don't think there was any chance in the world that Aube-Kubel wasn't going to re-sign. So, I don't understand why we'd say that's going to push Pitlick out the door. If we're saying that, then we've sort of just been saying from the start they're not going to bring Pitlick back because they weren't going to not re-sign Aube-Kubel, right?
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
No, that makes sense. Definitely, because you put that much resources into a player as the waiting game that they played with him and his development, and to just pull the plug on that after all this time would be ridiculous, Chef?
No, I kind of agree. I think it's a good deal. And I don't think Pitlick's off the table yet. I think, like what you said, when you're talking about people clearing out salaries, I think you could possibly see something that creates a situation where Pitlick stays. So who knows? I mean, I loved him. I thought he brought a lot to the table when he played. He had a lot of hustle, a lot of drive. It was what in some areas this team was lacking. So I was happy when him and Neck were on the ice. I thought they brought another level to the game, especially in the playoffs there. So, yeah, Dan pretty much said everything I totally agree with. So I just wanted to specify, I guess, what I was trying to say. I just think that there's a possible chance that they could still retain him.
Yeah, I would think Justin Braun is not going to be here. And it's no secret that all the teams are trying to move some salary unless they're, way down, on their cap, like Colorado and teams like Ottawa. But there wasn't a report from the fourthperiod.com's David Pagnotta that says the Flyers are actively trying to move some money. Who that is, we can only speculate. I think we have an idea who that is, and we'll talk a little bit about that with Russ coming up. But yeah, that's going to be the off-season drama. With the truncated off-season, things are going to get going here pretty soon. In fact, the NHL did verify that the draft will take place on October 6th and 7th, and then of course what normally would have been free agency on July 1st will happen at noon starting on Friday, October the 9th. So, and with that, we're going to turn over things to welcome our guest, Russ Cohen, and we'll be right back. And we are back with, from Sportsology.com, Off the Post podcast, and Hockey Buzzcast, and so many other outlets. Back with us again, Russ Cohen. Russ, welcome to O&B.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me back.
Hey, our pleasure. Thanks for doing this. So you're doing your usual buzzcast today, talking about the finals and all the free agents and things like that. And I'm thinking to myself, what is your opinion of what the Flyers accomplished this season? Like from where they started, and knowing what Fletcher was trying to do or trying to figure out what he was trying to accomplish with the team this year. How close did they get, and what do you see going forward to try and push them to another level?
Well, first thing is I felt like it was 2 seasons. So I'll say that, and then I'll say why after. But so I felt it was like 2 seasons, and I felt like that first season propelled him into the second season and got him good seeding, and they definitely were living up to it. I never felt like they get past the conference final. I just didn't. But I felt like, hey, if they got close to that, that is a good year. The only thing that I felt like they didn't accomplish is they got back to the playoffs, so they accomplished that, but they didn't solve any long-term blue line issues. And really, on a couple of the forward spots, Fletcher really just put a Band-Aid with those one-year deals. And so when those old guys sort of ran out of gas, they ran out of gas. And so I felt like that's the part where I can't tell you they're going to take the same steps next year because they're going to have even less cap space. And that's where none of us are going to like the Niskanen contract because they paid him too much. And he did okay. He rebounded a little, but there were some bad games for him. And you're going to now have to put more youth in there and hope that you can get similar results. I think that's where next season lies. And what kind of results are you going to get out of the youth? Does Brian Elliott get wooed by too many teams so you can't bring him back? I don't think he's signing for the same really cheap deal. Those are the issues. I don't think it's. I always think it's a mistake now, and I've made this mistake before in the past, to just basically say, well, because you have young players and because you went far this year, you should go farther next year. But now we have to remember those young players have to develop, and you don't know how fast they're going to develop at the NHL level.
Yeah, I mean, they had 8 or 9 players play their first NHL game this year.
Right.
So you don't know how many of those are going to filter out into next year, A, and B, how many of them are going to be able to take a large amount of responsibility, or in the case of players like Farabee, perhaps Frost, a greater responsibility that could ease the burden that might be caused by players like Voracek, JVR, if he's here, and Giroux, getting further away from their prime years.
Right. JVR is going to be tough to move. Farabee can do it if he's given the right ice time, the right line mates. He could score 50 points, but he has to get that opportunity and get it with the right guys, and also be able to just play it through and not worry about making mistakes and sitting as a result. If they just let him go, he'll do that. Now Frost, we don't know, because that's a tougher one, because he has different attributes than Farabee. He's more of a finesse guy. Farabee's a little greasier. Farabee does have a pretty good high-end shot that he didn't get to use most of the time because, for a part of the season, he was just surviving. And so Frost, we don't know what kind of situation they're going to put him in. Are they going to put him in right on the second line? Are they going to put him in on the third line? I know everybody's, saying, well, Nolan Patrick's going to be back, and and he looks great, and he says he's going to be back, but he hasn't had any contact. And this is, to me, is like the biggest thing that, yes, it's nice for everybody to say, because he's been away, you expect the guy back, and I hope he does come back. But he hasn't had any contact in practice or otherwise. He hasn't traveled at all. And he had that one little trip where he traveled. And so we don't know how all of these things are going to affect him. So, that 2C spot, that's going to be, an interesting thing. And you really don't want to put Giroux at center anymore, or you're just killing his offense. Whatever offense is left, you're killing it. And so there's still a fair amount of issues, and they're going to have to make some hockey trades to try and clear cap space. They're probably going to have to lose either some draft picks or some other prospects to do it. I don't see much way around it unless, if they stand pat, yes, they could fill out the lineup and give Elliott his money and get past the other things. But I think if they did that, then I would be less apt to say that they're going to, go 2-3 rounds in the playoffs again. So I think I think they're going to have to do some more, and more than they did in the last offseason. You know, that one I think was the easier one for Fletcher because he had cap space, but he maxed it out. Now it's going to be hard because it's a flat cap.
Yeah, that's the thing. We were talking about Patrick before, you were on the air, and that's just a wild card. And even Chuck Fletcher acknowledged that they're not really sure whether the original, the latest diagnosis of, well, it's not concussion related, but because he even admitted that can vary. And so, that's up in the air as you're indicating. And that brings me to that last question. I want to turn you over to prospect guru Dan Silver. But Bundy was on the broadcasters roundtable we were talking about earlier. He expressed concern between this big gap in age between the next generation and the guys that they're counting on that couldn't get it done in this past postseason. And seems to be suggesting, without coming out and saying it, that there has to be the kind of differences and changes that you're suggesting yourself.
Yeah, that has to be. I mean, even if you have to, trade Giroux or Voracek, I feel like you need to break that core up because at this point it's underachieving in the long term, and I think you have to hand this team over to somebody, whether it's Couturier or Kevin Hayes. Now, I know everybody wants to do it to Couturier, but he's not necessarily the leading type, and Hayes seems to vibe better with AV, and in the playoffs, Hayes was actually better. And so you have to look at those things and see, what's best for the team. But, yeah, they have guys. I don't know if Patrick will be one of them, and they'll have opportunity. There'll be positions up for grabs, but, yes, they're going to have to do some things to sort of change up the locker room a bit, I believe.
Schiff?
Yeah, I just want to get you while you're still there. You were talking about Elliott possibly being wooed away. And I'm thinking, he doesn't have that great of a rep with the fans. He always gets bashed, but he actually bounced back pretty good this year. Mm-hmm. And obviously Carter Hart likes him. And do you think it's realistic that, especially with the condensed season that's going to come up, they're going to play 82. They keep saying that. That means a lot of back-to-back games. Do you go with Elliott? Do you make the room? Do you move somebody else to keep Elliott just so both your goalies are comfortable and you know what you're getting with Elliott? Because the free agent goalies are looking a little bit on the expensive side this season.
Yeah, I would tend to do whatever I could to keep Elliott. I would. First off, because when Hart couldn't win road games, he was winning them. And so, it's easy to look at his, save percentage and a few other things and say, he didn't have that great a year. But he had a lot of wins. And he got a lot of those wins on the road. And that meant a lot to this Flyers season, and it meant a lot to Hart. It took a lot of pressure off. So I do think you want to cater to Carter Hart here, knowing that he's still young and knowing that Elliott's helped him.
There's only one concern I had was looking ahead and with the cost certainty that if you could get it, it would really be a good thing. These young kids that like Sandstrom, Ustimenko, Ursan, a little bit further down the road, they may not get as much development time as the Flyers would like. So I thought that might be the reason why they might want to get somebody else in there who could they commit to maybe 2 years to. And that would give them a little cost certainty and give these young kids a chance to develop a little bit longer. And it's not a reflection on Elliott other than his age, perhaps. And that was that would be my only concern, because you're back in the hole in another year. And Elliott's 30. I think he's going to be 36. Then he would be turning 37, and they're going to want to go in another direction.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. But I still think I'd prefer to bring him back for a year and make the kid happy for one more year. And then after that, he's got another year of experience, and then, he'll get it if he can't re-sign it. It won't be a problem for him. So I still would tend to do that. And Erson's going to get development time because they're going to be playing. They're playing in Sweden.
Right.
They're playing. They're practicing. They're playing. So he'll get it. And I think you'll see even a few more Flyers prospects get sent over there to different places to get that development time, knowing that, the AHL is not going to start up till like January. So I think they'll still get development time, but actually it'll be the Euros they get the most, and then the other guys that they can cut some deals for to get them over there.
Gotcha. Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I will be stunned if Brian Elliott is not brought back on a one-year contract for around what he made last year, which was $2 million. I mean, his contract before that was, I think, 2.3 to 2.5. Now it's 2. He's 36 years old. There are a lot of really good unrestricted free agent goalies. I don't think there's going to be a huge market clamoring after Brian Elliott. So, I'm pretty convinced that the Flyers are going to bring him back on a one-year deal for 1.75 or $2 million or something like that. So, one interesting thing, and we'll talk about the prospects in a little bit, but I don't know if you guys saw, but there was like a mystery injury scare with Samuel Ersson a couple of weeks ago. It came out that he'd sustained an injury at home, and it was feared to be very serious, and they were being very secretive about it. And they just came out and said, well, it's an upper body injury, and hopefully he'll be back in training in 2 weeks, so that maybe it wasn't as serious as they said.
Right, yeah,
but he's one of my favorite young prospects on the Flyers, so I was very concerned when I saw this secret injury type of thing. But it looks like he's going to be back in training in a few weeks. So I like him a lot. I mean, Ustimenko had a really good year last season, shockingly so, actually, and Sandstrom was terrible. But, goalies can be voodoo, as we know. But, I was just happy to see that Ersson's injury wasn't as bad as maybe some people thought.
So we have a draft coming up, and
we do.
Yes, it's coming up on October the 6th and 7th, and you have published your final list on Sportsology.com. I also looked at some of the other lists out there, and just your opinion about how deep this draft is and where it stands in relation to maybe some of the drafts have gone by the last couple of years.
I think this first round's really strong. I do, and I think that's the best part about this draft is the first round. But I do think you'll get a good second round too. Now, I don't know how many franchise players you'll get out of the second round. You probably won't get any, but you'll get NHL players, and I think you'll still get them into the third. I think it's always easy to say, and I hear it too many times, this draft's not as strong as last year's. And they're all different. Last year, the NTDP had better players, but this year's NTDP are really good players. They just may not have a superstar in there. And so I think that's where, people look at it and say, all right, because again, development is what development is. And so you have to look at that and say, hey, let's just look at for what these players are, for what the talent is. I mean, there's a lot of centers. There are fewer top-line defensemen than in some drafts. I mean, you'll have plenty of second and then a lot of like third pairing guys. But I'll tell you that's a little bit of a shortage, and definitely a shortage of, what you would call strong goaltending. But again, nobody can nail goaltending right out of the bat. It's just too hard except for certain guys. So that one, you never can really tell all the way. But at the end of the day, I really do think this draft is well positioned for a lot of teams. I think if you have multiple picks in this draft, you're in good shape. Especially teams like Ottawa that are really set up in this first round. I think they're in really good shape. I think, even the Stanley Cup champ is going to get a decent pick here. And that's, in a way, that's scary because, those teams, they're in the Stanley Cup, and yet they probably can still improve their prospect pool. And so I feel like that's going to happen too. So I like it. Maybe I'm more bullish than some others, but I'm never that guy that just keeps saying the same thing every year, like this draft's not as good as the last draft, because I've just heard it too many times over the 20 years I've been doing it.
Right. Is this a bad year for the Flyers who are picking at 23 to try and move salary by moving that pick out?
I wouldn't do it. I mean, I just wouldn't do it. I mean, to me, that's just, it's too much of a price. Unless you were getting somebody really special, I would rather not do that. And a good example is you don't want to follow history where there was a draft, and I can't remember the year, but I remember saying this scenario, Flyers getting ready to draft, similar situation. I say, the two guys they could get are John Carlson or Jakob Markstrom.
Yeah. And
Holmgren trades for Steve Eminger. Washington gets John Carlson.
Right.
How do you feel about that today?
Well, they got Lucas Spezza. Come on. We hated it at the time. We hated it.
Yeah. I went crazy in the stands. I was just like, I can't believe they did this. Like, these are the two guys that they're essentially passing on, and one of them took a little longer, Markstrom, and now he's close to a Vezina caliber goalie, and then Carlson could be a Norris guy. So
yeah. In fact, that could be
in a little bit.
Yeah. The NHL's having their awards as we're recording this. Is Yaroslav Askarov worthy of being talked about in the same sentence with, say, Andrei Vasilevsky? As a prospect.
Yeah, close. I was high on Vasilevsky in his rookie year, but I felt like he was an easy one to peg, and I think Askarov is similarly easy. I think you're looking at some similar traits there in athletic ability, fearlessness, really just a guy who has a lot of confidence in net and gives his players a lot of confidence. I would caution anybody who thought that, the World Juniors was something you could expect to see from him again because it was bad, because, he was the youngest guy in the World Juniors, and the fact that Russia even went with him was amazing, because that's something they wouldn't have done in the past. So it shows you the faith that they did have within him going in it. And then you saw he got a shutout last week, and he's doing great. He got Rookie of the Week. And so there's no real worries there. We thought the world of Samsonov, but he'll even be better than that. So if that helps.
Right. So today, you have you just have your players ranked based on based on what you think they are stacked.
Yeah, I mean, a company has forced me to do a mock this year, and I haven't done one in a while, so I am going to do a mock next week, just one, not like 100 like Mel Kiper. I'll do one, but I don't love doing them. I would rather rank, because it's hard for me to think about what a team might do. And, there's more guesswork in a mock draft than there is in my rankings, because at least in my rankings, I feel good about it. I put in a certain amount of work. With the other part, I'm trying to sit in their shoes. So it's a little different.
Yeah. There was one well-known draft pundit came out and predicted the Flyers would take Noel Gunler, the Swedish league. And I'm thinking to myself, so it begins. We're going to talk to Russ tonight. So just to start there, like, what do you think of his game, and is it realistic for him to be a kind of guy who might be there for the Flyers?
It's not realistic, but there is always a chance that someone gets lost in the shuffle. And I know Flyers fans are in this thought process of, let's see who drops to us, rather than, well, let's see who we have ranked here on the board. It just seems to be the way this year. for me, I mean, that would mean Gunler had to, drop, 9 spots. It's possible. I love the guy's wrist shot. He can make take-to-tape passes. He's great on the power play. He shies away a little bit from traffic at the moment. Maybe as he gets stronger, that will help because he's only like 180 pounds at 6'2", but he's a big talent, and I just happen to think he'll be gone by then.
Right, because he's got that scoring upside.
He does. Wrist shot's deadly.
Right. And what do you think of, just an aside, what do you think of Cole Caulfield going over to Europe?
I think it's smart because you don't know when and if college hockey is going to start. Wisconsin was a train wreck last year. I watched like 2 or 3 games, and they were just awful. He was firing and still scoring, but he could have scored more if he had like more of their goaltending was just so bad on that team. Like anytime, and you've seen how it affects the team. Like the offense is going, it's going great. Goalie gives up a couple goals, and all of a sudden the whole tone of the game changes. Yeah. So I like the fact that Caulfield's going to go over there. I think that's the best thing for him right now.
Gotcha. Dan, you want to go through maybe some likely targets for the Flyers based on what Russ has for us?
First I wanted to kind of go over a quote that Brent Flair had where he was talking about, I think this was a little earlier in the year, but he's saying about how it's a decent draft. He doesn't know if it's top end. The top 10, 12 guys look pretty high end. And then he came out, I think, a week or so ago and kind of said some similar stuff. And it just got me thinking that combined with the fact that they are trying to unload some salary, that they, as Russ mentioned, they may try and package a pick or two to try and entice someone to take James Van Riemsdyk or a Shane Gostisbehere. So, it's going to be interesting watching that and seeing what happens. I mean, in general, and by the way, I also was horrified by that, the trade. I think it was the Eminger trade. Just horrible. After trading away a first-round pick for Adam Oates, I thought that was one of the worst trades that the Flyers have ever had, was the Eminger deal.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, I think the Flyers are so stocked with prospects, especially guys that are projected to play in the middle 6 or the second pair defenseman. They're not, at 23. They're probably not going to get a first line guy. They're probably not going to get a top pairing defenseman. I'd like to see them take a risk and go for a guy that might slide for some reason, like that there's concerns he might not come over from Russia, like if Rodion Amirov slides to where they are at 23 because of concerns he might not come over from the KHL. Like, that's the kind of thing I'd like to see them do. I want to see them try and take a unflyer type pick, which means I want to see them try and take a guy who's got a high upside, and if they miss, it could be a disaster. The guy might never come over. But they're positioned right now because of how much talent they have, young talent, that's what I want to see. I want to see them kind of take a risk. And the other thing I want to see, and maybe Russ can talk about some of the guys that might fit the mold, is I do want to see them kind of go after someone who can play with a physical edge, just because I still do see them kind of as a team that they'll chirp in the playoffs and get involved a little bit physically, but the top end guys, not so much in that. So I wouldn't mind seeing a guy who maybe combines first round talent, but also a little bit of physicality. Right.
So, and I tend to agree with your last statement there too, Dan. Although years ago, one of the worst draft statements I ever heard came out of Glenn Sader when they drafted for toughness, and I said, you can't draft for toughness. You can't, because you don't know when that toughness is going to get there. But I do think it's fair that when you look at the prospect pool and you say, all right, Isaac Radcliffe is probably the one guy that fits the bill, even though he won't be top 6, and he's probably still a year or two away. So why not get another guy like that? And I agree with that. Right now, I don't think there's any chance Amirov will be there. I don't. His defense is so good that somebody will get him to come over sooner and probably at best play in the AHL maybe next year. And so based on that, I don't think and look, he has pretty good offense too, but he's not like a superstar offensively, nothing like that. But he's a well-rounded player. And so between that and some toughness, I don't think you're going to be able to get him, because I do think teams are going to look for exactly what Dan's talking about, because they see it in the Dallas Stars. If the Stars were to win the Stanley Cup, teams would be like, maybe, size and speed, not just size, not just speed. Maybe if we get them with both, that is what's helping to win now. And you could, I think you can make an argument with that. You're not going to have a team of guys like that. So the first guy I would say you would look at is Jacob Perreault. He's got a little bit heavy feet, but everything else is really good at. Great shot, two-way player, can score goals. Dad played in the league, centerman. He's feisty. He's not like a big physical guy, but he's a guy that if you want to get a lot of points out of, he might be there. And I do say might. Hendrix Lapierre is an interesting one, because I don't think he's got the toughness that Dan's looking for. He doesn't, but he's another centerman with decent size, with a really high offensive potential, but he gets hurt. And so he's a guy that some may look at and pass on because he was hurt this year, and I think he's had a little bit of an injury bug. That's something where this is a potential high-end scoring guy that you can get at 23. I'm pretty high on Tyson Forster, though, from the Barrie Colts, who does have size, he does have speed, he does have physicality, and his speed is good. Like, his speed's good now. So I think his speed will continue to be good up the line. He really does have an above-average shot already. He is a guy that everybody likes. He's a guy with a good hockey IQ. He's a guy that, you look at and you say, yeah, give him a few years and he can really develop into something special. And, is there a chance he could be a second liner? I think maybe because he can play tough and play in the corners. So that's the guy who I I have him ranked 29th, but again, you got to look at it and say the Flyers may have him higher because of those attributes. Because if they're looking for certain attributes, then that's possible that they'll have him at a different spot. And I don't think it's that big of a leap. And I think it's one of those things where, they don't really have a guy like this, because even Ratcliffe, I don't think, could score like Forster can and will.
Yeah, I mean, those are what you're describing from Forster. That sounds like the kind of guy. And as you're talking, I was kind of looking up some of these guys, getting a little bit more information. He seems like a guy that you might want to kind of take a risk on.
Yeah.
It looks like he's got a pretty good electric shot and can be a little bit physical. So, it's he had 5 game-winning goals. Like that's the kind of guy where it's like he could be a real shot in the arm one day when he's ready to do it, and he's already got size and strength. So then and the speed. Like, a lot of the guys at that size don't normally have the speed. And I don't mean he's not 6'7" or anything. He's only 6'1", but he's already over 200 pounds and sturdy as hell. And a lot of times those guys aren't fast, but he is. Yeah, it's so hard, like you said, because even you saw it in the last draft when the Red Wings went off the board and took the big German defenseman.
Yes,
there's so many ways that drafts can just kind of go in different ways, that it's trying to project who the Flyers are going to get at 23 is kind of a fool's errand. So you're right. It's just kind of about picking guys that might hit that profile, and then who knows, when they get down to that pick, they may be moving it away to try and shed salary. So I guess we'll see what happens. It is going to be fascinating to see where Askarov goes, because there are a lot of teams in the NHL that could really use a top-tier goaltender. So I
think he's going to go. I agree with you. I think he's going to go in the top 10. And honestly, I think starting with Detroit, teams will start to talk about him. Because in the end, who can't use a number one goalie? Chances are you're high on this draft list because one of the reasons you're failing is because you don't have a franchise goalie. Yeah, there'll be 4 or 5 teams that we'll all be talking about saying, well, they could take him, or they could take him, or they could take him.
I've seen some rumblings that, everyone seems to think that Lafreniere and Byfield are easy 1-2. I've seen some rumblings recently that the Kings may potentially pass on Byfield. Have you heard anything about that?
I haven't heard anything. The last I heard from the Kings, and this was at the same time that Michael Fuda was still there and such, that they were probably going Byfield. But I saw that Lisa Dillman wrote today, maybe they'll go Stützle because of versatility. But I got to tell you, and I interviewed Stützle, and I've seen Byfield. I saw him a couple games in a row. I would not, and Stützle could be the higher point guy. Could be. I don't think he will be, but he could be. But he's not a natural center. So you're going to have to turn him into a center. And I don't think if I'm drafting there, I'm looking for versatility when I know I've got this guy that is a natural center, and he still has upside, and he's super fast and strong. And that's it. He's been playing this position the whole time. I don't have to work him into that. And so to me, it could be even if Stützle, if they take him second and becomes a winger, and let's say he's a 75-point winger, yeah, that's a nice draft pick. But if Byfield is a 75-point center, you blew it because he's controlling more of the game for you, especially with that strength he's got. So That's a risk. That's a risk I wouldn't want to take, honestly. And I think it's different than the Pierre-Luc Dubois risk. I do. Because they needed a position and they saw that guy, and I didn't kill him for it because I knew that there was a chance he could do it. I do think there's a chance Stützle can do it too. But the issue is I got a guy who I don't think I have to take a chance with. That's the difference.
Yep.
Yeah, I was just curious if you're looking at your list and you look down and you go, who would you be? Every year, every draft, it seems like there's somebody that dropped further than everybody thought, and something. Oh well, they must have done something. Is there somebody you think in this draft is going to go lower than they should have? Pops right out at you?
Yeah, I think that could happen to Dylan Holloway because 4 years ago, he was thought to be the top guy in this draft. And he had this great junior A season. And then he went to Wisconsin. And he did really well in Wisconsin from a defensive and face-off winning perspective, center-wise, but not point-wise. But he also was a true freshman, which, again, there's not that many true freshmen. And you have to take that into account because you're playing against, 22-year-olds and at times. So I look at it and I say, yeah, it's possible because teams thought he had a higher end to his offensive game that he could take a tumble. But he is fast and smart, and I do think the offense will come back to some degree. I just think that was a bad thing with Wisconsin. But all the other parts of his game are really good and center-like. And so I put him at 13. I had him higher once, too. So that's what makes me think he could take a bit of a tumble.
Yeah, there's always a couple players.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and you look back, like a guy like, I don't know what he was ranked. Ricard Raquel ended up going later in the first round. He's a nice player.
Yeah, I think he was picked. I want to say he was picked 27th, something like that.
Yeah, by Anaheim. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of my old mocks and rankings are still out there, but I want to say I had him in the 20s, but I think he did drop 3 or 4 spots, 5 spots for I think that was about what he did drop. I think like Jack Quinn, I have him 18. I know some people are way more excited about him because he had this massive goal and point season. The development was massive for this year, and so that could get people really excited. The Flyers had gotten similarly excited with Scott Lawton after seeing him at the U18s, and definitely took him higher than he was going to go. Now he's turned into a nice player, but you can make the argument that at that spot, was he a risk? They probably could have gotten him at a different spot, but they fell in love with the guy. I do think there'll be teams that fall in love with Jack Quinn, and he'll go 5-6 spots higher than I have him ranked.
Right. Dan, did you want to maybe wrap up anything with the draft and maybe just hit 4 or 5 flyers for Rust and kind of get a progress report and compare each other's notes on that?
Yeah, one draft guy, see you've got him towards the bottom of your list, who's been, I guess, a little bit polarizing just because of his diminutive stature, is Zion Nybeck from the Super Elite. I know he's kind of had a really big season there. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I may be interviewing him tomorrow too. I have one interview yet to post on Sportsology with Helge Grans, the Swedish defenseman, and Nybeck is probably going to be my last one. I've probably done more articles on this draft than anybody in the industry for the different sites that I do. But I've been waiting on him because I wanted to kind of see, this is a weird year, right? Then, like, we're going to see how he's doing this year for HV 71 before we get to draft him. And that's an unusual thing. You don't usually get to do that. And I think he's got a great shot. I think his skating's good. I think he is another guy that has to round out his game. And so there's a risk factor there, but there's also a high scoring factor. And so he's going to sit there, for me at 30, and it's possible he slips into the second round. But I also think if you're one of those teams that, let's say you're Tampa, you might take the risk. You might say, you know what, let's get him, because what if he is a 30-goal scorer and we're getting him at the bottom of the first? We'll walk away from this laughing. And I think there's a chance that could happen. Yeah,
I mean, he's got a little bit of Alex DeBrincat to his game. He's so small. Yep. I mean, he's 5'6", but he clearly, can be a prolific scorer. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with him. I'm always fascinated with.
And he's good around the net too. Like, he's not a big guy, but he's good around the net, and that's the thing. That's another good attribute.
Yep. On the Flyers prospect pool, my thought looking at it is that, and I know we don't want to draft for need, but just, talking about the Flyers prospect pool, that it strikes me that we've got, 2 high-end defense prospects in the system in Zamula and York, and we've already got some really good young defensemen already on the team with Provorov, Myers, and Sanheim. So it seems like we're pretty set from a defensive perspective. There's also some mid-tier defense prospects like Millman and Hoegberg and Wyatt Wiley. And then, from a winger perspective, I mean, it seems like at the NHL level, we're pretty set with young wingers with Lindblom and Konechny and Farabee and Abe Kubel. And then from a prospects, you're looking at, you've got Brink and Ratcliffe and Noah Cates and Wade Allison.
Yeah.
Center to me looks like the spot, especially if we're not going to have much confidence that Nolan Patrick's going to be back, which I don't think any of us think he's going to be back anytime soon, and we'll be pleasantly surprised if he is. But considering that, it seems like there's sort of a lot of weight on Morgan Frost becoming that third-line center type of guy, which I personally think he can be. I'm a big Morgan Frost fan, but it's certainly not a guarantee. But once you get past Frost, there's really not much in the system in terms of guys who could be a third line center or above. I mean, do you agree that that's kind of the spot that they really need to focus on?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I do want to say I think Millman is high end, and I'll get with him in a minute. I think when you mention those other guys, he's right there with them. He may not be as flashy as like a guy like York, but I do think he's right there with them. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think Lisinski could walk in and take the 4C spot this year. And I think he's going to really vie for that. I watched him at his run in Ohio State. Initially, when I knew he would be a center, others were fighting me and saying, no, he's a winger, because that's where they were playing him. But then he went back to center last year and did really well again. And he's got strength. He's smart. He doesn't make mistakes. He does have a scoring touch. I don't think he'll be a high-end scorer, but he's a guy that could definitely get you some points, but also can play a good fourth line kind of game. He possibly could turn into a third liner, but I don't think so. But I think if you put Lisinski in there, and he does get the 4C spot, that does help the other situation a bit more. And I think you have to try Frost at 3C. I do. I think this year is the year to try him. Like, see what you got, see what he looks like. I don't think you're going to get anybody on the market that's going to help you in that regard. So you might as well try and fill that. I got to see Millman right before, I'd say it was late January, February, right in that range. And he looked great. And actually, he wasn't just playing the third pairing power play guy with some minutes. He was actually getting defensive minutes, and he actually was making good defensive plays. He's not physical at the moment because he needs to gain strength, but he could strip the puck. And so he was doing really well. He was great on the power play. His puck movement was good. He was very smart. And, Cole Perfetti, who's, one of the real high-end guys in this draft, and his teammate felt like he helped him at times on the power play and other things. And that's something where I don't take that lightly. There's times when guys will say, oh, yeah, Millsy, he's real good or whatever. And then, that's it, right? That's the compliment. No. Perfetti, and people can go on Sportsology. It's in an article. He went way more than that. And so, that counts for me because I saw those guys in action. I saw that power play in action. And I saw Millman surprise me how good he looked defensively and his feet, how they looked. And so I think he's right up there too. And I think that he is a guy that's developing faster than expected.
Yeah, I also love Millman. When they drafted him and they kind of talked about his raw tools, and then, I was at the Flyers development camp this summer after they drafted him, and I was extremely impressed with how good of a skater he was. And I also, thought that he had some good offensive instincts. I know during the season that Saginaw team was a little bit of run and gun. I know Brett Flair had some comments about, how he had to kind of take his offensive numbers with a grain of salt because of how run and gun that team was. But then it did seem like towards the second half of the season when you saw him play that he really improved defensively, cut down on the giveaways. And yeah, he's a guy that, behind Zamula and York, I have him pretty high. And it's him and the signing of Linus Högberg are the reasons that it didn't really bother me that they didn't sign Wyatt Kalynuk, because I've never been as high on him as other people have. And so, yeah, I'm with you right there that I think Mason Millman has very good potential. And this team's defense in a few years is going to be scary. You bump Myers up to 1D to play alongside, Ivan Provorov. And if York or Zamula can develop into the guy to play alongside Sanheim, and they're going to be a scary good defense core. And if you can trot out guys like either Zamula or York and Mason Millman or Högberg on that third pair, you're looking pretty good back there.
The one thing about Brink is, while he is really good offensively and can play with with high end talent because he's done that and excel, he puts himself in bad situations to get creamed, and he's not strong at all. And that's why he's been getting hurt. And if he's a guy that really, can't add some muscle to his frame, that may keep happening to him. So there's a little bit of a risk there with Brink.
You're talking about York or Brink?
Brink,
okay.
No, York I'm not worried about because he's going to be faster than a lot of guys, and that's not the issue. Brink's a good skater, but not like York. Like York's a great skater, and York will be fine. But Brink is a guy who puts himself in bad positions and tends to get creamed at times, and he's had injury issues, and so he is a guy that you're going to have to watch for that, because I've other people telling me that too.
Interesting.
So, Russ, boy, thanks for this. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your expertise tonight.
And I appreciate Chef not talking about maybe his latest pumpkin spice recipe, because I hate it. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I don't know if that's on his menu.
You'll never find pumpkin spice from me. It doesn't exist.
That's great. You're the man.
It doesn't exist. Pumpkin spice isn't real.
It's not. It's chemicals.
don't
garbage.
get it. Pumpkin is pumpkin. The spices are something else.
Right.
Ugh.
Now we could have a whole show about this. We've got to.
Yeah.
Oh,
We'll get
please.
you. We'll get you. In another show to talk about this fascinating subject. One of those inside jokes there. Yeah, Russ. So people can find you. There's so many different places on Twitter at Sportsology. Where else can people find your work?
Elite Prospects, a site called Featured. Featured kind of farms it out to some other sites, so you could just search me by name, and then you'll see articles pop up every week for them. Full press coverage. I've been doing some draft work for them, and then the podcasts. Stick to hockey, Off the Post. I'll be on the Sirius XM draft coverage in some way, shape, or form. But this year, I guess I'll just do it in my underwear because I won't be there. But I'll still enjoy it. And so, yeah, lots of stuff to come up.
Fantastic. Thanks for doing this.
Anytime. I always have a good time.
Yeah, always great to have you. You take care. So, gents, there's so much on the agenda that we could have covered, and we're going to probably get together with some of our TFP people and maybe have a little special episode to cover some of the league news. Just a couple things before we go. Bill Daly, who is the assistant to Gary Bettman in the NHL offices, talked about trying to get fans back into the stands as quickly as possible. They haven't given up on that. They might go part of the season with them, then without them, and then incorporate having fans at a certain percentage of capacity. But I did want to give the awards for tonight, the main awards. Okay, so the Hart Memorial Trophy goes to Leon Draisaitl. The Ted Lindsay Award also goes to Leon Draisaitl. Now, the Ted Lindsay, is that voted by the players, right?
I believe that's the case.
I think that's the case. But if I'm wrong, I'm sure people can yell at me at Isaiah, ISAIAH_520. Blame me, don't blame the show. Or you could go at O&B Puck, our Twitter account. Okay, so who wins the Norris Trophy? Roman Josi. And the Calder Trophy goes to Cale Makar, the Colorado Avalanche. And the Vezina goes to Connor Hellebuck of the Winnipeg Jets. That's well earned. He's probably the only reason they were close to doing anything this year. Any comments on any of those awards? Dan, let me hit you.
Yeah, it's just voting. I mean, I would still take Quinn Hughes over Cale Makar. They're both fantastic. It was great to see such two high-end rookie defensemen like those two guys. They're both game breakers already, and it's basically their first full seasons in the league. So those are, I love Quinn Hughes, and I thought it was laughable before the season when everyone was talking about Jack Hughes and Gakko, and I felt that Quinn Hughes was the guy who I would have bet to win the Calder at the beginning of the season, because not many people were giving him a lot of looks, and there wasn't a lot of people talking about him. But I think he's a phenomenal hockey player, and Makar is fantastic also. They've got a little bit difference in their games. I love those two guys. So
Quinn Hughes is next level the way he thinks the game. It's just, he's one of those guys you would literally stick around to see one more shift, just like you would stick around to see one more at bat. And for a great hitter, Quinn Hughes strikes me anyways, that kind of player. Even for a casual fan, he's just amazing. Really is. Great feet. Some of the best feet in the whole game. And with that, it looks like we have come to the end of another O&B Puckcast. It's overwhelming, the amount of information. Like I said, we'll probably be back with a special later with our TFP correspondent, Anthony DeMarco. And with that, Chef, where can people find you on Twitter? And if you have any final thoughts, by all means, hit us with that.
I think we pretty much covered everything, but if you want to get at me, you can find me at ChefDeLeftB on Twitter.
Fantastic. Dan, any final thoughts and your contact information?
Final thoughts. I still think Tampa's going to come back and win that series against Dallas, but I guess we're going to see what happens. That it's amazing, all the games we've had in these playoffs where teams just haven't gotten a lot of shots on net and have been dominated, and some of the games have gone the other way in terms of who wins. But anyway, hopefully it's a good rest of the finals. And you can find me on Twitter at dsilver88. It's the 88th podcast for the show for you guys. And 88's Eric Lindros, and my Twitter is dsilver88.
That's correct. And, of course, tonight's opening had Eric himself. Those were great days, and I guess next show we'll be talking about whether the Flyers need some more star power or not. We'll get into that. Don't worry. We'll keep you covered here at the O&B Puckcast. And, of course, if you could rate and subscribe to the O&B Puckcast, it moves us up the charts. And those 5-star ratings are really appreciated. And if you do subscribe, when people look for Philadelphia Flyer Podcast, we get mentioned higher in places like Apple Podcasts, and we're also on SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spotify's a hot one, iHeart, you name it. Tune in. We got a YouTube channel, so check us out there. Expect a lot of activity with a lot of teams trying to dump salary with this truncated offseason, and the draft is so close. And it'll be really, really interesting, and we'll keep you updated as always. And with that, everybody, have a great night. Take care.